Good morning. A bit of news to report today. Jon Huntsman, the former Utah governor, former Republican presidential candidate, and former strident critic of Trump, has been appointed by Trump to be a Russian ambassador. No, not that kind of Russian ambassador, the kind that the U.S. president nominates to act on behalf of the United States government within Russia, so the U.S. ambassador to Russia. I say strident critic because Huntsman did something that you would think that Trump could never forgive. When the quote-unquote Access Hollywood video was released at a critical juncture in the 2016 campaign, he called on Trump to drop out of the race and for Mike Pence to take over the top of the ticket. So I think that's notable because something you frequently hear about Trump's temperament is that he's unwilling to forgive anybody who slights him on a personal level. That's his operating concern whenever he's making a personnel decision. So remember when Elliot Abrams, the George W. Bush era neocon luminary, was denied a position in the State Department. This was attributed to Trump simply being annoyed that Abrams had publicly criticized Trump during the 2016 campaign. But if that were the sole standard by which Trump was making these kinds of decisions, then he certainly couldn't have brought on board somebody like Huntsman, who basically abandoned Trump at a crucial moment. So I think there's a little more ideology at work there than most people tend to assume with Trump. I think he probably had some genuine aversion to the neoconservative program that Abrams embodied, and likewise with Huntsman. If you think back to the 2012 Republican primary campaign, Huntsman did advance a critique. It was sort of a milquetoast critique, but he did advance some sort of critique of the George W. Bush era foreign policy regimen. He was wary of rash military interventions. He seemed to be skeptical that the war in Afghanistan, say, was winnable on a long-term level. He was never really that full-throated about it, but within the spectrum of Republican politics, it probably aligns somewhat close to where Trump seems to be coming from. So the ambassador to Russia position is going to be vital for any number of reasons. Obviously, it's a heavily fraught issue on a domestic level, with people, namely liberals and some conservatives, routinely speculating that Trump is somehow in league with Russia, that he's compromised even, or a Manchurian candidate is one of the most extreme characterizations. But so Trump needed somebody who was very adept to navigate that dynamic. And I think Huntsman, even though he's not somebody who I necessarily favor in the abstract, I think given the current political circumstances, he'd probably be an ideal person to handle that dynamic. I think he was appointed by Barack Obama to be the U.S. ambassador to China. So he has some semblance of bipartisan credentials there. You could see that as a good or bad thing. I think just for the narrow purpose of reducing tensions with a foreign power, I think Huntsman's skills are probably suited to that task. When I interviewed Stephen Cohen 2 weeks ago or so now, something that he mentioned, and I linked to that video in the description box here, but something he mentioned that would be extremely important going forward is the nature of whoever Trump picked to be ambassador to Russia. That role has been very significant in the past, and especially now as Trump seems to be pursuing some sort of détente with Russia. He's going to need somebody who is adroit at diplomacy to fulfill that role. On the other hand, Trump did appoint. Sorry about that. Trump did appoint a gentleman by the name of Richard Grenell to be U.S. ambassador to NATO. Another important position as it relates to Russian affairs. And Grinnell seems to be just a conventional kind of unhinged hawk character, more in line with the Bush school of thinking. He was pretty well ingratiated in the Republican foreign policy establishment. So that would be worrying if your desire is to achieve some sort of détente with Russia. The point there is that, despite rampant liberal paranoia and this constant conspiracy theorizing, there's very little indication as yet that Trump has done anything to institute obviously pro-Russian policies or appoint obviously pro-Russian personnel. That's sort of just a rabbit hole that a lot of liberals and Democrats have fallen into. I think all told, Huntsman is probably a decent pick, much better than somebody who is just instinctively hawkish and confrontational. So that's it. Just wanted to do a quick comment on that, and I will see you later.